The first thing I notice is the sound. Not the sizzle of oil on a hot flat top. Not the rhythmic, comforting clatter of porcelain plates being stacked in the pass. It's the soft, wet whisper of crimson velvet kneeling on dirty linoleum tile. I'm behind the counter, my hands still dusted with the ash of the morning's prayer candles, when the doors of the restaurant swing open. The brass bells above the frame don't ring. They choke. It's as if the very air in the room has developed a throat and is currently being strangled by the weight of what just walked in. 5 men in full apostle gear fill the doorway. They are silhouettes of violence draped in holiness. Their heavy coats are the colour of dried blood, stitched with gold scripture that seems to writhe along the hems like gilded snakes. Their boots are polished to a mirror finish, heavy enough to crack a man's ribs without slowing their stride. Each one carries a sanctified pulse rifle, the barrels wrapped in white prayer cloth to signify that the lead they fire is a holy sacrament. The entire room freezes. A regular at table 3 drops his spoon. It hits the floor with a sound like a gunshot, but no one looks at him. The new cook doesn't freeze. Kalen stands at the prep table in the center of the kitchen. His sleeves are rolled up to his elbows, his thick forearms dusted in white flour. He is slowly, methodically, kneading a mound of dough. He doesn't look up. He doesn't stop. He presses his weight into the table, folding and turning, like the world hasn't just ended 10 feet behind him. The apostles don't raise their weapons. They don't shout orders. They meal. Slowly, in perfect synchronization, they drop. Their foreheads hit the grease-stained floor. One of them, the youngest on the far left, is crying. I can see the tears hitting the tile. It's not the weeping of a man facing death. It's the sobbing of a pilgrim who has finally found the shrine. It's relief. A silver basin is lifted by the lead apostle. It's filled with sharp-smelling vinegar that steams faintly in the humid kitchen heat. The scent hits me. Acrid, stinging. The smell of ancient penance. My throat tightens. Kalen still doesn't look at them. He presses his thumbs into the dough. Fold, turn, press. Like their submission is nothing more than a fly he's waiting to swat. My hand slips under the counter. My fingers find the cold, heavy handle of the verdict stamp. It hangs on a silver chain, a sacred seal of the order. If I strike it against the ink and the scripture paper, I can end a life legally. I am the witness. I am the judge of this room. I see it then. As Kalen leans forward to reach for the salt, his collar shifts. There, on the side of his neck, is a faded black symbol burned deep into the skin. A jagged, 3-pointed crown, broken by a vertical line. The heretic's mark. If I speak the words, the apostles are mandated by the high law to rise and execute him. If I stay silent, the heresy he carries might burn this entire city to the ground. The vinegar in the basin starts to bubble, reacting to the heat of the room. The lead apostle lifts his head just an inch, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Miss," he whispers, his voice trembling with a terrifying reverence. "If the basin boils over, the ritual is void. We are permitted to stand. We are permitted to take him." Kalen finally stops kneading. He wipes his floury hands on his apron and turns. He looks at me, not them, His eyes aren't the eyes of a cook. They are the eyes of a man who has seen the bottom of the abyss and decided to build a house there. The interior of the restaurant reflects this grim sanctity. The walls aren't covered in menus. They are carved with the 7 commandments of the order. Instead of curtains, we have heavy chains of prayer beads that rattle in the wind. The light comes from oil lamps shaped like halos, casting a flickering golden glow that makes everyone look like a saint or a demon. I stood behind the counter, my fingers twitching near the verdict stamp. I wore my usual ash-gray apron, the red confession ribbon tied into my hair as a sign of my role as the neutral witness. I was supposed to be the one who didn't take sides, but looking at Kalen, that neutrality felt like a thin sheet of glass about to shatter. Kalen didn't look like a heretic. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. He wore a rough black tunic, his skin perpetually streaked with flour or soot. But the way he held the knife, it wasn't the grip of a chef. It was the grip of a man who knew exactly how much pressure it took to sever a spinal cord. "The apostles are still kneeling, Kalen," I said, my voice barely audible over the tolling bells outside. "Let them kneel," he replied. His voice was deep, resonant, and entirely devoid of heat. "The floor is dirty. It's a fit place for them." I looked at the polished side of my cleaver resting on the counter. In the reflection, I saw his neck. The mark was clear now, the jagged crown. It was the brand given only to the high executioners of the order who turned against the Grand Inquisitor. It was a mark of supreme betrayal. By the laws of the City of Oaths, anyone harboring a heretic is subject to erasure. My life, my restaurant, my family, all of it could be wiped clean by a single word from those men on the floor. "If I strike this stamp," I whispered, looking him in the eye, "they'll kill you. They have to." Kalen stepped closer. He didn't look afraid. He looked bored. He picked up a piece of the raw dough he'd been kneading and held it out to me. "The law says you are the judge of this room, Alara," he said. "But the law also says that a judge must be pure. Are you pure?" He knew about my brother. He knew about the lost soul I was hiding in the basement. The power shifted in that moment. It wasn't the apostles holding the guns that mattered. It was the secret Kalen held against me. I let go of the verdict stamp. The metal clinked against its chain. "Get back to the stove," I snapped, my heart racing. "Table 6 needs their penance broth." Kalen smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who had just seen a judge fail her first trial. The following morning, the bells tolled a black noon. It meant a high-ranking official of the order was on the move. The heavy oak doors of the restaurant groaned as they were pushed open by 2 acolytes swinging censers filled with myrrh and sulfur. Behind them walked the archpriest Malachi. He was a terrifying sight, draped in blinding white silk and gold embroidery, his face completely hidden behind a mirrored ceremonial mask. The mask was etched with the faces of weeping saints. Everywhere he looked, he saw the world through the tears of the holy. He didn't sit down. He walked straight to the counter and placed a small crystal vial on the wood. Inside, a thick black liquid glowed with an unnatural, bioluminescent light. "The High Inquisitor has noted the presence of the apostate in your kitchen," Malachi said. His voice was muffled by the mask, sounding like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "He is a cancer. But he is a popular cancer. To execute him openly would create a martyr the district cannot afford." "Justice in liquid form," the priest replied. "Season his midday meal with this. He will die of natural heart failure during his afternoon prayers. Do this, and your brother's status as a lost soul will be reconsidered. The kitchen transformed. The apostles, still lurking in the corners of the room like gargoyles, moved forward. They began lighting candles, arranging them in a perfect circle around Kaelin's prep table. The steam from the boiling pots began to rise in thick, heavy sheets, looking like ghostly hands reaching for the ceiling. I went into the kitchen. Kaelin was standing there, watching me. He saw the vial in my hand. "He wants you to be the executioner, Alara," Kaelin said softly. "It's the Order's favorite trick. They don't just kill their enemies. They force the people who care about them to do the killing. It keeps the guilt distributed." "I have to save my brother," I whispered. My hands were shaking so hard the crystal vial clinked against the rim of his soup bowl. "Then do it," Kaelin said. He stepped aside, gesturing to the broth. I poured it in. The black liquid vanished into the amber soup, leaving only a faint, metallic scent. Kaelin sat down. The archpriest watched from the counter, his mirrored mask reflecting the flickering candles. The apostles stood like statues. I held my breath, my stomach churning with a sickness I had never known. Kaelin took a spoonful, then another. He ate the entire bowl, slowly, with a monastic grace. Veins began to darken under the skin of his throat. A cold sweat broke out on his temples. He gripped the edge of the wooden table so hard his knuckles turned white. The archpriest leaned forward, his gloved hands gripping the counter. But Kaelin didn't fall. He set the bowl down with a deliberate clack. He stood up, his height suddenly dwarfing the room. He walked toward the archpriest, his eyes burning with a terrifying clarity. "You lied to God, Malachi," Kaelin rasped. The darkening veins on his face began to pulse. "This isn't justice. It's a chemical agent from the old world. You used a secular poison in a sacred house." The mirrored mask of the priest suddenly developed a hairline fracture. Then another. It shattered, pieces of glass hitting the floor like diamonds. Behind the mask was a man paralyzed by a fear so deep he couldn't even scream. The apostles, sensing the shift, didn't move to protect the priest. They looked at Kaelin. To them, surviving the poison wasn't a biological feat. It was a verdict from the heavens. "The priest is impure!" the lead apostle shouted. They dragged the screaming Malachi out into the street. Kaelin collapsed to one knee, gasping for air, his body finally reacting to the toxin. I ran to him, but he pushed me away. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You did it, Alara," he whispered. "You poured the cup. You're one of them now." Power flipped. Kaelin was now untouchable, a living miracle in the eyes of the city's killers. And I was just a poisoner who had failed. Word of the miracle at the kettle spread through the district of Ash like a wildfire. Suddenly, the broken bread was no longer just a restaurant. It was a court. Every day, the sinner's queue stretched for 3 blocks. Corrupt merchants, brutal gang leaders, and even minor officials of the Order came to eat Kaelin's food. They believed that if they could survive his cooking, they were forgiven. But Kaelin had weaponized the kitchen. He began to cook with the truth. I watched a thief break down in uncontrollable sobbing over a simple plate of spiced rice. Between mouthfuls of grain, he confessed to every house he'd ever robbed, his voice echoing through the silent dining room. I saw a warlord from the North District drop his fork into a bowl of bitter soup and begin reciting the names of every man he had murdered, his face twisted in a mask of sudden, crushing empathy. Kalen stood at the pass, watching them with a cold, clinical detachment. He wasn't serving calories. He was serving chemical and psychological triggers. Visuals of the dining room became a montage of spiritual agony. Tears fell into steaming bowls. Apostles stood in the shadows, not with guns, but with glowing scripture tablets, recording every word that fell from the diner's lips. "Why are you doing this?" I asked him late one night, after we'd scrubbed the floor of the day's vomit and salt water. "You're breaking them." "I'm not breaking them," Kalen said, sharpening a long, thin boning knife. "The Order built this city on the idea that confession is a choice. I'm making it a biological necessity. I'm taking away their ability to lie." I began to realize the scale of his war. He wasn't just hiding. He was dismantling the Order's monopoly on truth. After he went to sleep, I did something I knew would cost me my soul. I used a skeleton key to open the locked spice locker Kalen had installed. Behind the rows of dried peppers and rare salts, I found a false wall. Inside were his notes, thousands of them. It wasn't recipes. It was a map of the Order's corruption. Names of inquisitors who took bribes, the locations of mass graves where lost souls were dumped when they became too expensive to feed, dates of purges that had been written out of the official histories. Kalen hadn't been an executioner who turned rogue. He had been an executioner who was too good at his job. He had kept a record of every soul he had been ordered to erase. The power flipped again. I didn't just have a cook with a secret. I had the ledger that could burn the entire city's foundation. The knowledge in those notes felt like a hot coal in my chest. But as the bells of the city tolled for the Sabbath of silence, my own desperation finally outweighed my fear. I led Kalen down into the hidden chamber beneath the restaurant. The air was cold and smelled of damp stone and old linen. There, on a slab of granite, lay my brother, Leo. He was bound in glowing scripture chains, iron links etched with verses that suppressed the spirit. He was a lost soul, a victim of the Order's psychological conditioning. His eyes were open, but they were vacant, staring at a heaven he could no longer feel. "You have the notes," Kalen said, his voice echoing off the stone walls. He didn't sound surprised. He sounded disappointed.
"I felt you in the spice locker."
"I don't care about your war, Kalen," I said, my voice cracking. "Look at him. The Order did this because he tried to read a forbidden book. They erased him. You survived the poison. You make people see the truth. Fix him." Kalen looked at Leo. The flickering torchlight cast giant, distorted shadows of the two men on the walls. The heretic's mark on Kalen's neck seemed to pulse with a faint, sickly light.
"Miracles aren't free, Alara," Kalen said. "To bring someone back from the void, something has to be traded. The Order uses blood. I use memory."
"Do it," I demanded. "I'll give you whatever you want. I'll burn the verdict stamp. I'll help you leak your notes." Kalen stepped forward. He placed his hand on Leo's forehead. His skin seemed to glow with a sudden intense heat. A blinding white light flooded the chamber, so bright I had to cover my eyes. I heard the iron chains shatter, the sound of breaking glass and screaming metal. The light faded. Leo gasped, his chest heaving as if he had been underwater for a lifetime. He sat up. He looked at his hands. He looked at me. "Leo?" I whispered, reaching for him. He looked at me with the blank, polite curiosity of a stranger meeting someone on a bus. "Who are you?" he asked. The light hadn't just broken the chains. It had cauterized his mind. He was alive. He was healed. But everything that made him my brother, our childhood, our shared grief, our names, was gone. Kalen turned away, his face half shrouded in shadow. "He's free, Ilara," Kalen said. "But freedom from the Order means freedom from everything. You got what you asked for." I held my brother as he cried out of pure confusion. I looked at Kalen's back. I held the moral high ground no longer. I had used a heretic's power to buy a hollow shell of a man, and in doing so, I had become just as transactional as the Order I hated. The trial finally arrived 3 days later. It wasn't a trial for Leo or for me. It was the trial of the apostate. The Grand Inquisitor didn't come with soldiers. He came with a congregation. The restaurant was forcibly cleared and transformed into a holy courtroom. The tables were pushed to the walls to serve as pews. The ceiling, usually stained with grease and smoke, was draped in massive red banners of burning scripture, the edges literally smoldering with slow-burning embers. The Grand Inquisitor was a man who seemed to be made of nothing but shadow and bone. He stood 7 feet tall, draped in robes of jet-black silk that absorbed all light. Above his head, 3 metallic halos floated in a slow, hypnotic spin, humming with a low-frequency sound that made my teeth ache. Kalen was dragged from the kitchen. He didn't fight. They stripped him of his cook's tunic. His bare chest was a roadmap of old scars and brands. In front of the entire district, they forced him into the Shirt of Thorns. It was a garment made of living metallic vines that constricted and pierced the skin at the slightest movement. The crowd, the same people who had eaten his food days ago, now chanted prayers that sounded like rhythmic curses. "Purify the vessel, drain the lie." The Inquisitor turned his hollow gaze toward me. "Ilara," he said. His voice wasn't a sound. It was a vibration in my skull. "You have harbored this creature. You have tasted his work. You are the only one who can testify to the flavor of his soul." The apostles pushed me forward. They handed me a ceremonial silver spoon. On the counter sat a final bowl of soup Kalen had prepared before they took him. "If this dish is pure," the Inquisitor said, "he lives. If it is bitter, he is erased. And you with him." The power was no longer a seesaw. It was a crushing weight. The Inquisitor held the city. The crowd held the noise. And I held a spoon that weighed 1,000 pounds. I dipped the spoon into the broth. It was clear, almost like water. I took the bite. The world didn't just dissolve. It exploded. I wasn't in the restaurant anymore. I was inside Kalen's mind. The judgment through flavor had reached its final, lethal peak. I saw him as the high executioner. I felt the weight of the sword in his hand as he decapitated a mother in front of her children because she had doubted the tolling of the bells. I saw the mass graves he had dug, his hands raw and bleeding. I saw the children being led away to the schools of silence, their tongues cut out, for the good of the Order. I saw that the God the city worshipped was nothing more than a series of gears and contracts managed by men who feared nothing but their own shadows. I saw Kalen's moment of betrayal. It wasn't a sudden moral awakening. It was exhaustion. He had killed so many people that he had run out of names to record. He had stopped because he was tired, not because he was good. I snapped back to reality, collapsing onto the floor, screaming. My eyes felt like they were bleeding. The Inquisitor stepped forward, his halos humming louder. "The verdict, witness. Is he pure?" I looked at Kalen. He was trapped in the shirt of thorns, blood beginning to soak through the metal vines. He looked at me, waiting for the end. He wanted to die. He wanted the ledger to be closed. I looked at the Inquisitor. If I said he was impure, they'd kill him, and the Order would win. If I said he was pure, he'd go free, and he'd continue his cold, loveless war. I stood up. I wiped the tears from my face. My innocence hadn't just been lost, it had been shredded. "He is not pure," I said. The crowd gasped. The Inquisitor leaned in, a flicker of triumph in his hollow eyes. "But," I continued, my voice suddenly as cold as Kalen's, "the law states that an impure vessel must be bound to the service of the witness until the debt of their sin is paid. I am the witness. He is my debt." I took the verdict stamp from its chain. I didn't strike the paper. I struck Kalen's forehead with the heavy metal seal. The apostles froze. The Inquisitor's halos stopped spinning. By the oldest, most obscure law of the City of Oaths, I had just claimed him as my personal property, a slave laborer for the penitentiary kitchen. "I sentence him to service," I said, "under me, forever." The Inquisitor hissed, a sound like steam escaping a pipe. But the law was the law. He could not break the ritual he had used to trap us. The restaurant is open again. Kalen is back in his torn cook's clothes, his sleeves rolled up. He is kneading dough, but he doesn't look at me. He kneels when I enter the room. I sit at the counter and eat a bowl of soup he prepared. It tastes like nothing. No truth, no memory, no joy. Just salt and water. Behind me, the apostles kneel to me now. I am the woman who owns the High Executioner. I have the notes. I have the power. I don't look back at them. I just keep eating. A queen of a hollow kitchen, waiting for the bells to toll.